Yeah. What is violence? Well, that's a fairly easy one, because you're probably looking at it. I mean, this whole system or society that we have created is in itself an act of violence. And how is that so? Well, first of all, I just would like to say something about life in general and how life should be. Maybe we can have a look at the Matrix movies and at Agent Smith, yeah? Probably everybody knows him. It's the whole idea of the Matrix, but that doesn't really matter. What matters for this topic is what Agent Smith says, that humanity is like a virus. They settle down somewhere and then they exploit all the resources until nothing is left, and then they move to another place and they just leave everything in a state of abandonment. Now, how should life be in general? So you see, there is, for example, an ant colony. And ants are living in a colony. It's like a hive, right? They live for each other more than they actually live for themselves. So the hive is the most important thing. And if something threatens the hive or the colony, then they will attack it. Ants do predate on other animals. There's even ants that take down crabs by going into the soft parts and then basically eating the thing alive, or just biting it until it's dead. But that in itself isn't really violence, because that's just life. You know, it's fairly complicated to say what really violence is. Because if you look at nature, you could say that nature is, in a way, violent. But is it? Because for me, violence comes from to violate. So what is nature violating? Nature is providing food for other beings. Or nature is providing food for its creation. So what is food? Depends on the perspective. To some, plants are food, and to others, animals are food. There are plants that eat animals, and there are plants that eat plants. And then there are animals that eat plants, and then there are animals that eat animals. So what is violence? So when you look at nature, right, where are there, who is able to maintain and set boundaries? The way I see it, animals or plants even manage to set and uphold boundaries as long as they are strong enough to keep these boundaries intact. And these boundaries are being exerted or, do you say amplified or uphold or held up? Are being held up through force. So you're trying to scare your opponent away. You can do that through physical powers or just by intimidating them, by snarling or showing your teeth and your claws and making your whole posture really unfriendly so that your opponent fucks off by itself. So what is violence then? Well, if somebody is violating your space, then you can defend yourself. So violence in itself is nothing bad. Violence is a natural defense mechanism. And now we have to understand something about violence, which is violence is not necessarily physical always. Because if it comes to humans, which have the ability to speak, but also as humans, right, there's something that I believe ants don't have. Ants have, they have probably, right, they're kind of like one mind. But with humans, it's a bit different. I'm not sure if ants would pick on each other within their own hive. Now, if we see society as a hive, then somebody has to explain to me why we are all picking on each other. Because to me, violence does not start with somebody that punches me or physically harms me, because violence already starts when my basic human needs are being violated. And what does that mean? Well, my basic human need is to move. I have a right to move. And now I'm being sent to school and I'm being forced to sit down. And when I have the need to move, and I'm trying to express that by moving, or I have so much energy that I shout into the class, I'm being punished. That to me is violence. Because my basic needs as a human being and as an individual, and each person has different needs, and then my needs are being violated on behalf of, whatever reason they have to force me to sit down. They probably say it's for my own benefit. But is it? I don't see that. They say it's for society. But maybe I do not want to help society in such a way. Maybe I want to be in nature. And then what I see is that nature is being violated. Trees are being treated like objects. They're being cut down just like that, as if they aren't even living beings. They're just treated like rocks. And, there's a perspective that would say rocks are living beings and you have to treat them with respect. You have to treat nature with respect. And that includes the human nature. And if a society fails to uphold this, then this society is violating me and nature. And my basic needs, to me, are more important than what everybody else is talking about here. My basic needs, to me, are more important than having electric cars. Because electric cars are just a fallacy. It's a lie, of course. And they're being used to make money and to destroy the environment. So how are we supposed to live in such a fucked up thing and then not become violent because my needs have been violated ever since I was a young child by my parents, by people who just come to me and touch me without even asking me if I want to be touched, just because they want to touch me because maybe I'm a child and they want to make themselves feel a bit better. Yeah? I mean, my rights as a being have been violated so many times as a child. I always had short hair, and random people came and they asked my parents whether they could stroke my hair because it would feel so nice for them. Nobody asked me if I wanted that. My parents were insecure, so they said, yeah, sure, because they didn't know how to say no. And so in that case, I was the victim, I was being violated, and today if somebody would do that, I probably would kick them in the shins. And I would probably teach my own children to do that, to stand up for themselves. That if somebody comes and just wants to touch them, kick them in the shins. And if somebody says then, or you just say no, yeah, you have to do these things. You have to teach your children how to stand up for themselves. Not with harming other people physically, so kicking others in the shins is, yeah. I mean, if you teach them that as a child, then when they get older, maybe they resort easier to violence. But to just firmly and strongly say no. Because nobody has the right to just touch you. And with me, it went so far, I don't hug people anymore. Because I don't want to. I simply don't want to hug people that run around and are just angry all the time. That drink coffee the whole day. That run around like in a strut like they're the best person alive. And then I'm supposed to hug that person, even if it's family. I don't want to do that. Because to me, my personal space is very important. And I like to keep myself clean. And you may think that's selfish, but I say that's self-responsibility. Because nobody gives a shit about what I want. Unless I say I want this, or I just take it. That's the kind of world that we live in. If you don't just take care of your own needs, nobody will give a crap about your needs. Right? They may pretend like it sometimes. I mean, there are very few people who actually care about how you feel. Not because they try to pamper you, but they really see something's wrong with you. Most people, they will never really see you, and that's the truth. Most people will never see you for who you are, and they will never see the burden that you're carrying because they're busy carrying their own. So violence, right? You can get angry now and say, well, I've been violated. Yeah, and then you can get really angry and walk around like this. I've been violated. But the thing is, everybody's rights have been violated. I mean, even the politicians' rights have been violated. Why else would you go into politics? Because you don't want to be violated anymore. So you want to stand on top, where you can get rid of this shit. But the thing is, on top it's even worse. It's everywhere the same. Everybody's trying to establish themselves as this is who I am, right? It's like this constant bickering and pushing each other around. I want to be on top. And I said at one point, you know what? You can all play with each other, right? You can all do whatever you want. Fuck each other, or I don't know, shout at each other or growl at each other or honk at each other. I'm out of this. I'm not playing a part in this anymore. And I've had it so many times that I wanted to spend just a nice evening with people, right? And there would be a girl, for instance, and then there would be another guy. And the other guy would constantly pick on me, like drop these really annoying remarks where he constantly was trying to challenge me in some way. And I just said, at one point I said, hey, Sometimes you say these things, I just want to punch you in the face, and nobody understood why I said that. How disrespectful he was all this time. Well, maybe it was my fault because I just shouldn't have invited him. Yeah. Maybe that was the problem in the first place. So after a while I said, I just don't want to spend time with certain people anymore. I rather spend my time alone because I am more at peace when I'm alone, because then I can choose what kind of thoughts I want to have in the room. Then I can choose how I engage with myself. But if I'm depending on other people, there's probably going to be a lot of this kind of quiet violence where somebody says something to you which is actually meant to hurt you. They might not even realize it because everybody does it to each other, so it's just like a habit. But I just said, I don't want to spend time with toxic people anymore. Right? I don't want to spend time with toxic people anymore. And after a while I also said, I don't really care why you're toxic, because I know why you're toxic. I know it better than you, because you don't even know that you're toxic. So there's really strange things going on. And I've been trying to tell people, listen, change your diet, go out more. They don't listen. They just keep doing the same things that they've been doing all the time. And so I said, I'm just going to change myself. I'm just going to work on myself. And I'm going to stop talking to all the people that are really toxic. And then they can just complain to each other. They can complain to the people that want to complain. But I don't want to complain. I mean, you could say this is complaining, but I'm not really complaining. I'm just saying how it is, because that's how it is. People are really toxic. This society that we've created is really, really toxic. It's disgusting how people treat each other. I mean, if I would live, if this would be a natural tribe, and somebody would treat me with such disrespect, I'm sure this wouldn't end well for the person who would treat me like this. Because there would be no police, and everybody would understand that what happened was good that it happened. But if you do something here, if somebody comes and spits on the ground in front of you, just because he's angry, I've had that once because I was walking barefoot through the streets and he spat in front of me. I mean, in earlier times, I would have probably had a brawl with him. I couldn't have let that stand. But now I just have to keep walking. Because if I do something, then what happens? The police comes and then you've got all kinds of trouble. Because that kind of violence is not tolerated. But when you see the kind of violence that the police is sometimes using against citizens that are demonstrating, well, that's okay then. But then you also have to understand that the people who are demonstrating are often really violent because they're really frustrated. And they sit at home and they get really angry at the police. But it's not the police's fault of what is happening, because everybody's contributing to this. So if you want to change something, you first have to change yourself. It's not the point to just get angry at everybody and to be violent at everybody and to want to smash down walls and be really angry, right? That's not really the point. The point is to figure out how to find balance yourself first, and then to go out into the world and talk about how you found that balance. But first you have to find it yourself. And when you get that, then people might listen to you. But even then, it will take a very long time. A very long time. At least that's how I feel like. So violence is violent. Violently spreading. And if we don't want that there is like a civil war or something and people really start going nuts, then we have to start making sense. And we have to stop meddling with all that science, and we have to start finding a bit more balance. And to say, okay, we have to start connecting with nature again. We have to go out more. And we have to turn inwards more. I mean, go out in the sense of going out into nature. And then plant trees and engage with nature. And plant our own crops. But do that from a place of heart. I don't really like the word so much. But it's the word that everybody understands, right? So you want to work from a place of your heart. And you want to, that means you have to connect with yourself. With yourself alone. That's very important that you spend time alone. Where you can retreat into yourself and understand how you're feeling. Which rights, which needs have been violated? When have you been violated? You know, being violated may be just a feeling. And maybe you will find that when you start and you try to talk to people about that have violated you, that they will say they didn't do it. Because most people cannot allow themselves to think that they've done anything wrong. So, in many cases, you may just have to keep that to yourself. Or you do what I did and just start sharing it on the internet. In the form of a blog, or images, or whatever, all the negative emotions you have, probably it's best to simply find a creative outlet. For me, it was first my podcast, and I mean, you probably know by now, but then I started with books, and then drawings and images, and then I also started doing articles on Medium, all that kind of stuff, just to channel my emotions. And you can even just write a diary, but don't keep it. If you write a diary, don't keep it. Write the diary, and when it's full, you go and burn it. I mean that. You go and make a nice fire and you burn it. Or you make something else out of it, I don't know. But if you keep the diary, for some people, you know, they always go back to the diary and read it. But the trick is to channel these emotions into something and then to let it go. To let it go. Because if you keep the diary, you keep holding on to it for the rest of your life. But the thing is, you have to dissolve it. And that's the trick to it. Anyway, you know, sometimes I start talking and I think, oh my God, this sounds like I'm riling up people. But then at some point I start to calm down a little. Yeah, because it's not the solution to just hack everything to bits or to let it out on the police. I mean, the police surely is a barrier between maybe us or the mob and the politicians. But you also have to understand that you are part of this system and you are using it. So what you should do is to work on yourself so that you contribute positively. So that if you go out on the streets and somebody spits you in the face because he's really angry, you just take a tissue and you wipe it off and you keep walking. And then that person will feel really ashamed. That's all you can do. You cannot repeat the violence that you've received. And for that you can learn maybe from Gandhi, who said this is a non-violent revolution. Right? If we would ever go onto the streets and demonstrate against exploitation and stuff, against all this oppression, against the school system, against corruption. You know, if you really wanted to do that, to demonstrate against the state, you have to be prepared that there might be people that try to create havoc, that try to divide the demonstrators, and that try to make them become violent by scaring them, by sending people that whisper into other people's ears. You know, that kind of stuff. You have to be prepared for that. So you have to learn how to deal with this. And it's surely a very hard thing to do. So you have to learn to take nothing personal. And if somebody spits you in the face, you take a tissue and you wipe it off. You just breathe into your stomach and then you walk away. Because if somebody's so toxic that he has to spit you in the face, all you could do is punch him. And do you want to do that? Do you want to have this kind of violence on your hands? Because you don't know what he's going to do then. He's looking for an outlet. Do you want to be that outlet? I've been that outlet for a lot of people. And I can tell you it's very unpleasant. You know, I always thought I help people if I give them a chance to discharge their frustration. Now I just stay away from them. I just ignore them when they're angry. You know, that's the best way to go about it, because otherwise I am the victim. And I have used people to get rid of my anger. And I just know it's not the right thing to do. And I had to work a lot with my shame for what I've done. So if somebody would spit me in the face, which I hope might probably never happen, or punch me in the face, I don't know. Maybe I just have to be perceptive enough that I can judge the situation before it comes to it, so that I can avoid it. You know, and if I see him coming, I just move out of the way. Right? So you just have to pay attention. And I think that's roughly all I had to say on violence. You know, sometimes I just do these recordings, I actually give advice to myself because I don't know what's coming my way, right? I don't know what I have to deal with in the future. So I just want to be prepared, and once I've said it, you know, I remember it. Sometimes you have to say it to know that it's there.